Testing, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2, 5. Hello, and welcome back to the Kyle Phoenix Show. As I am your host, Kyle Phoenix. Always trying to adjust this slightly, do this with a computer instead of normally. I take the shows with video cameras, so either I'm in the studio or I use my own video cameras, or I take some studio cameras out of the studio to location shoots, like when you've seen I filmed classes, I filmed large discussions and everything. So this time I was kind of doing it at home from my own personal library. So I really, really like my books. It's a little sad. It's my man cave thing. Okay, so let's get right back into it. Let's talk about development. So we talked about budgetary development. Now, I'm trying to make the concept of development very broad so that you can apply it to wherever you need to apply development to, whatever kind of project you're trying to create. So I will use some things I know from some scenarios, as well as my own work, because it's good evidence and it's something I'm familiar with. So in figuring out a budget, I figure out a budget pretty much for everything. So one of the things that's included in my budget here, obviously, is I have a computer, I have a monitor. Well, it's my laptop. I have a couple of laptops, monitor, camera, speakers, mouse, printer. Behind there is a scanner. I have a PC that's actually under the desk here. Let's see, what else do I have in regards to the computer stuff? Over there, I have some of the other video equipment where I'm able to screen from the cameras that I have, and tripods and stuff. So all of that kind of stuff goes into what I'm thinking about my budget for creating these either webisodes or television episodes. My first camera I bought September 2008, Best Buy, $200, small DV tapes that are about this size. The camera is, where's it at? It's over there. Small camera. Worked pretty well for about 5 years. It's a little bit shaky now. Sony, not bad. $200. So that's how you figure out first your levels of investment. It's important to figure out your levels of investments for whatever you're trying to do, whether it's your own personal thing, I don't know, some kind of personal development improvement plan. If you want to do a little entrepreneurial thing, if you're trying to do some kind of project, if you're doing some kind of work project, because generally, not so much of time is money, but you want to be able to account for your time through the concept of resources and currency. So I'm able to say, when I first started YouTube videos, and then I bought a webcam. I think I paid about $100 for the webcam. So $200 for the camera, $100 for the webcam. Tapes, those mini DV tapes cost on average, I generally buy them in bulk. They cost about $2 a piece. And I also take my classes that I teach, so it's generally 1 to 2 tapes per class. So I've pretty much bought probably about 500 tapes within the last few years. So I would count that within my budget, about $1,000 on videotapes, about $400 or $500 on cameras and tripods and stuff. I really haven't, because the studio has such high-end cameras, I really haven't had to invest in a beautiful video camera yet, but I probably will at some point in doing this. Back to time to budget. So I figured out how long would I do this? How long would I be interested in being invested in doing this? So you do your whole applications and trainings and stuff with the studio. You talk to their staff who are also producers, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to pull together. And they essentially train you how to both produce and, if necessary, host a television show. So I thought about, okay, let me make a commitment. It's a weekly commitment. I decided on a weekly show versus a daily show, or 5 days a week, because I thought 5 days a week would be just a lot of content to try and produce. And so that's something that I'm always looking at, just like the big boys do, just like the big companies do, just like big movie studios or television networks do. Content, content, content. So here's what I will say that has served me well for designing and developing this whole thing. I've found templates or mentors that maybe people don't even know for how I do stuff. So one of my templates for this is I looked at the Oprah Winfrey Show, and I sat down with my handy-dandy development book, and I figured out, based upon some of the numbers that come up in different kinds of articles and stuff, what must be, how they must figure out the production cost of each television show. And I came, there was an article somewhere in this mess of bookcases. There was an article, Fortune magazine, I believe it was 2003. Maybe on another episode I'll flash the cover, because now I can start flashing stuff of what I have here, or I'll bring it up on the video edit of this. So it was, Fortune magazine was talking to Oprah for the first time about the business of being Oprah, the television show, the magazines, the movie production stuff, how staff is looked at, how staff is trained, all different kinds of things, her own personal vision back into the business and what that looks like, what she's had to adjust herself to, what she's still working on. There was a concept of a network then, and she had done some kind of stepping in minor investments into other networks, trying to figure out how to do this, because that's really what starts happening in development. You start figuring out how to do a little thing, and then you get the little thing right, and then you stretch, and then so you do a little something bigger, and you stretch, and you go bigger, and stretch, and a little bit bigger. So the original idea or creativity gets bigger and bigger over time. And before you know it, if you've paid attention, if you've had control systems, we talk about systems and processes, and development notes, keeping notes and records, however, or to some kind of measured system, so that, if I always teach in my classes, particularly classes that are around motivation and people are trying to accomplish something directly, pretend that Santa Claus or God is going to come to your door one day. And when Santa Claus or God comes to your door one day, they're going to say, "What do you want?" And I'm going to be able to walk right up to him and say, "Well, you know something? On page 17, see, what I need is, if you have it all written down, it crystallizes your thoughts, it crystallizes your abilities, it even pulls into play we've talked in several other shows before about things like The Secret and stuff, of manifesting, of creating, of aligning." So lots of times for the past, 2014, I would say from about 2002, 2001 to 2002, I have felt and have maintained being 80 to 100% in alignment with my destiny, in flow with myself, my capabilities, my thoughts, my feelings, that, I'm like, do I like this? Does this feel good? Even sometimes when it's a bit of a struggle, problems and bills and family and relationships and all different kinds of things. Is this it? Is the beat playing? Is this? And sometimes I can feel it, and I go, no, I gotta pull it over. So that helps. It really, really helps writing it down, looking at it, projecting, I consider in my development books, what does the audience want? What am I hearing from people? What am I seeing online, on Facebook, on groups, and groups that I'm managing or facilitating or workshopping? So you want to kind of pull all that back into your budget of what you can produce. So what can you produce? So I'm producing the show, and I'm like, okay, time. I have to look at time because that seems to be an important integral thing of some of what she was talking about in the article. So I decided that my agreement to the studio, initially, it was for 200, it's for about 300 episodes. 300 episodes, which was essentially six and a half years because of when it actually started. So 6.5 years. And then as time went on, first year, second year, by the second year, I started talking to some of the staff and the people there and negotiations about production, what I could do with production, how much further I could take it. And I started looking at, I looked at it for two reasons. I'll tell you what I looked at, and I'll tell you why I looked at it. How much further could I go? Could I do 10 years? Could I commit from 2008, 2009 for 10 years of the Kyle Phoenix Show? Could there be a weekly Kyle Phoenix Show minimum for 10 years? And I would slowly develop it. Now, in parentheses to that, the reason why I thought of this is because you need time to develop what you're developing. You need time to practice. I needed time to get comfortable on camera. I needed time to learn how to do this from notes and extemporaneously. There were a few times, generally sometimes in the studio, can't see them, but I sometimes have my students with me because they're learning about stuff and we're talking about different things they might be interested in. So I'd like to bring them to another place they might not normally have access to, as a lesson, as a mentorship, as for them to see me working in a different environment, to see why I work in different environments and stuff, so we can have some good discussions about their own interests, not necessarily just what I'm doing. So sometimes off to the side, when I've been filming shows, have been some of my students, and we talk about the processes and the development of what's going on. And so one of the things that I've related to them is that I looked at the Kyle Phoenix Show. I was essentially practicing how to put together a television show for about the first 200 episodes, which would be about 7 to 10 episodes from when this is broadcast. The 200 episodes, 200 weeks of the Kyle Phoenix Show are just practice, are just me trying to get good at doing this, at having it on the screen, at having it set up, at having the sound, at having the camera, at having all of the pieces going. So that was my initial work with the whole setup of it. So those 200 episodes. Then my next thought was time. How long can I do this? 6.5 years. Then in 2 years talking to them, talking to the studio, Time Warner Cable, all the different people involved, all the producers, all of the guests, some of the entrepreneurs I talked to, some people who I had an interview, they said, hey, what you doing with this? Or how far is this going to go? Or how extensive are you going to make this? Then I started thinking, and I'm reading my Oprah stuff. I'm gathering as many Oprah business articles. I am very, very unattached to the whole fame thing, which is really kind of weird because there have been several instances where I've been known in public. Oh, Kyle Phoenix. And I'm like, where do I know this person from? And generally, if I seem a little surprised, I generally think you might have been one of the students, one of my really big classes, and I've forgotten your name and your face. And oh my God, I've forgotten your name and your face. And, as a teacher, you feel bad about that. I feel self-conscious because they remember you and you don't remember them. And then people are like, no, I watch a television show. And I'm like, really? And I forget. I literally forget. I honestly forget that this is broadcast to 500,000 people. And sometimes I catch people looking at me. People have stopped me on the bus. People have stopped me on the street. And I'm like, oh, yeah, because you don't change inside. Well, that's a whole fame discussion. But so I say I tangented into that because I was talking about collecting Oprah information, business information, looking at a television show, looking at creating a television show that was an expression of one's inner self and inner vision, the maturation of the vision, the decision to renegotiate a contract, to extend a contract, to slowly, like we talked about, the enhancement of stuff, making something bigger and bigger and bigger. And I said, okay, maybe this vision of 6.5 years that I thought was something, it's about 320 something shows. I think it's 326 shows. I was like, maybe there's a bigger vision for that. So what I started considering was, okay, I'm going to keep on doing these. And then I started literally, just like I have books behind me, I have a library now of Kyle Phoenix episodes. I also have a library of all of the classes and workshops that I've taught, pretty much about 90% of them from the past 5 years. So I'm like, okay, and I'm learning from these business articles. Your library has value. And I'm like, whoa, my library has value. You're creating value because you're creating content. So I'm like, okay. So some of the content you can see, of course, on YouTube, the Omni Group videos, Kyle Phoenix, and you see that I slowly add stuff. So at first, it's kind of where I started. I started the videos before I did the television show, and I started adding some more videos. Then I had to think about the budget, the ownership, the legality of a television show. What was I going to do with it? How was I going to make it useful and maybe even profitable? So useful, educational, motivational comes to you. Is this useful to you? Is this giving you something? Am I talking about some good stuff on here? Am I pointing out some good books? Am I showing a good video, a good interview? Is it good and useful? So that's really the first predicating thought to most of my topics and subjects, which is why I purposefully, because I have had interns and students who really suggested some really interesting, wild stuff to do with the show, which would have been entertaining, maybe, but I don't believe wholly useful or educational. And I didn't just want to do just an entertainment show. I think in some ways, I enjoy entertainment, but I think that not everything, there can be edutainment, it can be some fun kinds of way of learning stuff and a fun kind of dialogue. And that was the response I was getting back. People saying, hey, this is a great dialogue for you to talk about sexuality, for you to talk about race, for you to talk about social issues, manifestation, personal issues, existing in the universe, God, all those different kinds of things. This is a great venue. And I was like, maybe I just want to just keep that what it is rather than, try to have an American Idol contest on or something like that. So that's the premise of the development. You figure out what are you creating, where it starts and what it is. Then the budget to it. Talk about the cost of the equipment. You always have the budget and the cost of the equipment. Generally, I'm in jackets, probably about 80% of the videos. I try to be in a jacket and a shirt and a tie and everything, just because it presents better on television. And then I started looking at, what am I going to do with the television episodes? I've got this whole library. Oprah says they're worth something. She says her library is worth something. So if I can infuse some value into my shows, how do you infuse value into a television show to make it worth something in a financial sense, not just an educational or a mental sense? So I started looking at different ways to monetize the television show and figuring out what is the value of a television show and what is the value of certain topics and discussions, which kind of got me back to, I edit a show. Generally, when I take a show, it generally works out to about an hour or so sometimes, and I bring stuff in, take stuff out, clip stuff down, or I have timers. Sometimes I have timers and clocks around me in the studio or around here. Or I'm watching a timer on the screen of how much time I have so I can edit it properly. I'm also editing in my head as I do the show. But I thought, what if I expand that? What if the show 10 hours, sometimes to an episode, depending upon how intricate an episode gets, is pretty much my hour, 10 hours to get a half an hour show down to turn in format. What if those whole 200 episodes initially were practice? And what if 325 episodes were an advance, because I'll be better, as I get to 300 and so, would be better. And if they were better, maybe I could edit them down to something. So in my development book, one of my development books, all of my development books, I keep working out different ways what to do with it. Will approximately, I think it works out to something like 300 or 400 hours of television. What am I going to do with that? Because then I thought, okay, I'm going to extend it. Before I get to the 6.5 mark, you generally start. You should always, by treating things in a monetary concept, even if you're doing it for free, whether there's another company involved or not. So I do this, whether there's another company involved or not, or multiple companies involved. I always have a mental contract of how long I'm committed to be somewhere. Sometimes it's as short as a year. I've been at a job and I've been like, I do this for a year. I can handle this for a year, handle this for 2 years. I do this for 18 months. Mental contract of how long you can do something. When I look at writing books, I have a period of time for that as well. So it's up to, within a year's time, 140 books. And by like February, I believe, most of them will be out because they're slowly staggered. So it's not just a flood out in the world. So that's pretty much from February 2013, February 2014. Time frame, systems, process. What am I trying to do with them? What am I trying to make them? What am I trying to produce from them? How am I making them useful? Then YouTube videos. The YouTube videos, I got into an interesting situation with YouTube, which most people don't know. Of course, their parent company is Google. That technically, once you upload a video to YouTube, you don't completely own it anymore. You're sharing in ownership from it. So they can control it, because that's essentially why they want to be able to do it. It's not a licensing agreement as much as it's a partnership agreement. And remember, I'm kind of studying and listening to the Oprah stuff about owning yourself, owning your product, making partnerships. And I was like, I could put all my television shows up on YouTube. But once I saw, wait, it's a partnership of my shows, but I'm not licensing it to them. I'm like, you can monetize stuff back and forth, but it's not. Let me think about that. Let me put a pin in that. Let me think about that. So when you're thinking about your budget for whatever you're thinking about, you want to think about kind of three ends to the financial. You want to think about what it costs to start. You want to think about what you might generate in revenue back from it. And you want to think about bills. So who's got to get paid off of? So if it takes $10 to start, it makes $20, but it costs you $11 to produce it and operate it and all the different kinds of things and pay people off, then you're in the hole $1. So you always have to look at kind of those three factors around it. What it takes to create, what you have to buy, what you might get back from it, and then what you have to pay out from it. Or from the distribution system, producers, directors, video people, videographers, camera people, talent. Something has to get paid off of, not because just a camera just isn't enough. Internet service has to be paid for. So that's one of the things in considering in a budget. Always consider all of the pieces of it, because that's generally where most people. The learning aspect of it is difficult for people, as well as the budgetary aspect is difficult for people. The budgetary aspect is difficult because people look for the reward first. How much money am I going to make off of this? What kind of money is this going to turn into? And some of that is attached to fame when it happens in a media sphere. But real money is made in time, in measured processes, in systems, in deliberation, in thought, in seeing ahead, in creating a sustainable product, all of those kinds of things. So what we're going to do I'm going to close this one out. I'm going to film another one, part 2 of budget and money and business, essentially, in your development process. And we'll talk a little bit about, I'll actually snatch out the book, the business of television, the business of media. As always, I'm your host, Kyle Phoenix. This has been the Kyle Phoenix Show. You can email me at KylePhoenixShow@gmail.com. Check out our website, Kyle Phoenix. You can find me on High Five, MetaCafe, Sleepo, YouTube. All you have to do is just go to Google or Bing or Microsoft Explorer, type in Kyle Phoenix. Also, the Kyle Phoenix blog will come up. You'll see on the Kyle Phoenix blog all of the little short articles and stuff that I've written about relationships and race and media and all different kinds of things, entrepreneurship, business, finance, as well as I've tried to pull in some great articles and information to really bolster the site, give it a little weight, and give it some counterpoints and counterbalances to my own thoughts about all of these different issues. And then you'll also see where it links back to all of the written work I've done. So there's a whole thing on Amazon. There's a whole thing on eBay. I'm just really just getting to a point where I'm kind of just getting a little bit of everywhere. So just have to type in Kyle Phoenix and you'll see the everywhere that Kyle Phoenix is at. As always, thank you so much and have a good evening.